Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about the Portland Timbers in the Moving Forward series episode. And before I start, I do apologize the fact that you can't really see the green marker. So obviously, every time when I do the Moving Forward series episode, I always write the text in the same color as the team. And since the Timbers wear green, I have to go with the green text. And that if you know one thing about the green text that I've done in previous video, it doesn't really show very well on the camera. So again, apologies the fact that you can't really see it very well. But this is where I of course read it out throughout the video. So in some way you don't even need to see the text that is on the board. Now that being said, looking at the Portland Timbers this season, well, it feels like it's a carbon copy of what we saw last year, minus the off the field drama that we saw last season, where they start off poorly. Things kind of went a little bit better, but then eventually things didn't really quite pick up. They fired Giovanni Savarese, got Miles Joseph in there, and it seems like that new head coaching boost kind of helped out big time because they made a late second half charge. It looked like they were going to make it to the playoffs. Only for the last two game happen again, where they in the most pivotal time of the period where they need to continue that momentum and not really they falter so that they can miss out on the playoffs. They did exactly that. But nevertheless, they finished with an 11, 10, and 13 record and finished with 41 points. And keep in mind, they were actually the first team out in terms of the Western Conference, finished 10th in the Western Conference. They scored 46 goals this season, but they allow 58 goals. That is the second most out of any team in the Western Conference. And this has been a problem for the Portland Timbers for the past couple of seasons. They just cannot be able to get a good defensive structure for the last couple of years. And it was once again the problem this year, giving up so many goals in these games, and they had a goal differential of minus 12. As I mentioned, they finished 10th in the Western Conference, which means that they were the first team out because of it. But in terms of the top goal scorer, you got Evander actually tops the list with 9 goals. Now, I've said before about how Evander turns out to not really live up to his expectation. I mean, it really depends on how you look. If you're a Timbers fan, I can see some that say that maybe he lived up to his expectation because he did end up to be the top goal scorer, and then near the end of the season he did sort of figure it out, and you could use the narrative of that. This is an example of a player maybe trying to settle in, and eventually when he does settle in, things start to get going, and that was kind of the case with Evander. But that being said, when you look at the price tag that the Portland Timbers have paid him, you would expect him to not only get the ground running, but also he should be a focal point of this team, which was kind of the case. But there's just also been times where in his first season with the Timbers, he's been very inconsistent. There's been some amazing performance that Evander has put, and then there's some performance that you just kind of question how in the world is he worth $10 million? Where is this guy that supposed to be kind of like our future Diego Valeri? What was in terms of how to play, because he looks absolutely awful. So yeah, that's gonna be something that I think Evander is gonna have to hope to fix in the second season. He needs to be more consistent. Then you got Frank Boley with 7 goals. Frank Boley actually started off well this season, but then he kind of faded away as the season goes along. Then you got Felipe Mora with 6 goals, Darren Aspria with 5 goals, and Santiago Moreno with 3 goals. Now, top assist leader, Santiago Moreno leads the team with 9 assists, followed by Juan Mosquera with 6 assists, Darren Aspria with 5 assists, Claudio Bravo with 5 assists, and Jimmy Chara rounds up the top 5 with 5 assists. Now, when you look at the last 5 season for the Timbers, they have now gone 2 years in a row without making the playoffs. That has not happened in a very long time, because this is a team that has regularly been a playoff contender. But this season they finished 10th with an 11, 10, and 13 and finished with 43 points. And then in 2022 they finished 8th, 11, 13, and 10 with 46 points. And like I said, both of these seasons are pretty identical, because both of these seasons they finish as the first team out in terms of the playoff standing in the Western Conference. Now in 2021 they made it all the way to MLS Cup, but in that MLS Cup run, they finished fourth with a 17, 4, and 13 record and finished with 55 points. Now in 2020, in the COVID shortened season, they finished third with an 11, 6, and 6 and finished with 39 points. And although they didn't make it to MLS Cup that year, they did win the MLS's back tournament, which is definitely the greatest tournament that the Timbers have ever won, because nobody has ever won the MOS's tournament besides the Portland Timbers, and nobody will ever win the MOS's back tournament besides the Portland Timbers. But in 2019, they finished in sixth place with 14, 7, and 13 record, and they finished with 49 points. Now, in terms of average attendance, 23,103, good for ninth in the league. The Timbers always have really good attendance. One of the most loyal and hardcore support team in the league. But as I said, the attendance, it still hasn't gone back to where it was a couple years ago when they were actually averaging 25,000. And again, maybe part of that is due to what happened last year, where the attendance really took a bit of a drop for the Timbers because of the whole off the field situation that is going on. But in terms of MVP for this team, I'm going to go with Santiago Moreno. Again, this is a guy that I think he had a breakout season, especially in the latter part of this season where he really break out. And who knew that putting a guy in a number eight spot turns out to be a better ways than using him in the wing, because when he was using in the wing, he wasn't as effective as he was using in the number 8 spot as when Miles Joseph decided to deploy him. In terms of disappointment, it's got to be Jimmy Chara. I mean, I could have chose a lot of different players, but got to be Jimmy Chara in terms of the disappointment. I could have easily gone with Yasa Nishgoda, but I'm gonna go with Jimmy Chara mainly because, again, for the past couple of seasons he's been a bit of a disappointment, and that he just have not shown anywhere near the quality that we saw when he came into the league. And although, like Nishgoda, he suffered some injury throughout the time. And speaking of injury, that is gonna be a big thing that I'll talk about this team, because you talk about a team that is probably one of the most injury riddled team in this season. Portland Timbers is definitely that team, and it's getting to a point where you can also say that yes, they've been getting a lot of bad luck in terms of the injury bug. Some of these injuries that some of these player has got has been reoccurring injuries, so you kind of had the sense that you got a question in terms of maybe the Timbers have just way too many injury prone player on their roster, or the fact that you might have to question in terms of the medical staff, and also maybe even the turf at Providence Park, which is something that I think there's going to be a strong argument, because turf has always been one of the biggest discussion and in the league, and a discussion of just negativity surround the fact that turf field basically damage a lot of these players' needs, and it's no wonder why a lot of these players have suffered torn ACL on this Portland Timbers side. In terms of revelation, gotta go with Team Moreno again. Again, just a breakout season. I think he's just gonna get even better, and he's also part of a team where we talk about the old core for the Portland Timbers. It feels like they're now starting to transition into a part where not only they're starting to get younger, because this was one of the problems for the Timbers for the past couple of years where they were getting older, but now they're starting to find some good young players that perfectly fit into the role that was left by previous player. Yeah, now things are starting to look well for this team. So out goes Sebastian Blanco and Diego Valeri. In comes Evander and Santiago Moreno in those spots. So one right for the Portland Timbers. So yeah, they still own Seattle. So if there's one thing that Timbers fan will be at least very happy about this season, is that they still have that bragging rights over the Seattle Sounders. I mean, it's no wonder why Sounders fans and even Brian Schmetzer have said that this hasn't really become a rivalry in the last couple of years, because the Portland Timbers have always beat Seattle, and in this season, once again, they have not lost to Seattle. They were able to go unbeaten in all three of their meeting, including, I think they won two of those three meetings this season in the Cascadia Derby. I might be wrong though. I know for sure that they won one of them, and that was the first meeting. But I think they also won one. I know they draw in the second meeting, but then the last meeting, I think the Timbers also won that meeting as well. Miles Joseph really make the Timbers fun again. So obviously, even though Miles Joseph is not gonna take charge of this team on a permanent role, we'll get to who they hire as the head coach in just a bit. But he really made the Timbers fun again. I mean, during the latter part of Giovanni Savarese time with the Timbers before he eventually got the chopping block, this team looked like they were going through the motion. But once Miles Joseph came in, he definitely changed the tactics a little bit to make the Timbers fun again. Now, I'm not sure if that's a lot due to with the new head coach or the new interim head coach boost that we've seen, and we see this all the time. Whenever a new interim head coach comes in, you're gonna see the team perform well because they want to perform well under their new boss so that they can play uh, get picked in the future game as well. But yeah, during that time and really during that spell, the last 10 games, this Timbers team were very fun to watch, and it looked like a Timber team that we were expecting this season to be a team that should be fear in the Western Conference. But as we'll talk about in just a bit, things kind of didn't quite work so well, at least in the last couple of games of their season. But the other thing that went right for this, and this is actually a thing that could be good news for a lot of Timbers fan. They're starting to shape up a good core, especially on the attacking end. As I said, this is where I go back to where I said, there's some of their old core players have now either been retired or are about to move on from the team. But now they have some fresh young players in those spots, and they look like they could be a real deal for this team and can get this team back to being a contender in the Western Conference. Now, obviously, this good core of players that they've shaped up. The big question is that can some of these players stay healthy? And this is where we perfectly transition into terms of what went wrong for this team. The injuries. Again, the injuries has just been brutal for the Timbers for the past couple of season, and it happened again. Just so many bodies going down left and right to a point where we talk about this season in terms of probably the most injury cursed team in the league. I think the Portland Timbers are probably right up there in terms of being the top five or even the top three most injury riddled team this season. Every time when they look like they got some of their star player back into the roster, oh wait, they just got injured again. And some of these players, that even though they came back from a long-term injury, never really perform at the same rate as what we saw once they before the injuries has happened. So yeah, injuries was a huge problem for this team. The other big problem is the defense. Again, the defense still sucks, and part of that has to do with also the goalkeeping situation because it was a revolving door in terms of the goalkeeping position. Both Ayaz Ivicic and David Bingham basically share that role, and it doesn't seem like either of them was a regular goalkeeper for this team. I mean, it gone so bad to a point where we even heard rumors of Ivicic not happy at his role with the Portland Timbers and even kind of demanding a trade to a point where he actually was suspended in the last couple of games because of some disciplinary reasons. So yeah, goalkeeping was a big problem, and again, it's not a big surprise to see that when you give up so many goals this season, it's not just the defense that could be poor. Maybe it could be the goalkeeping too, because I guarantee you that there was time this season where some of those goals that the Timbers conceded are very preventable if they actually had legitimate goalkeeping. And this is also where I'll say that they should have never let go of Steve Clark to the Houston Dynamo, because as what we've seen this season for Steve Clark at the Houston Dynamo, he still is a legitimate goalkeeper, and I'm pretty sure the Timbers really miss his service and maybe regret the decision of letting him go to the Houston Dynamo. And then, of course, the final thing that went wrong for this team is deja vu again in the last two games compared to last year. So last year, the last two games they had two games that turns out to be the death blow of this team, especially on decision day too. I mean, as I said before with this Timbers team, these last two decision day are pretty much carbon copy of each other. Where they have to win in the last game to get themselves into the playoffs, and they didn't do so. In fact, they lost by the same scoreline of 3-1. And I would say this year, sure, you could say that it was more painful because they're playing at home this year. Yes, they're facing against a Houston Dynamo team, and the Dynamo has been on an upswing, but there should be no excuse to lose at home. And I know Providence Park is not as much as a fortress as it used to be, but yeah, just a very deflated kind of resort for the Timbers, and that it just feels like it was deja vu all over again in a game that they have to win to try to get into the playoffs. Well, actually, this season, unlike last year where they had to win, this year they actually didn't have to win. A draw would have been enough for them to make it because the Quakes also drew Austin. But the fact that they didn't even get that, that's got to be very frustrating if you are a Portland Timbers fan. Now, moving forward for this team, one of the things that they need besides defense is they need a DP forward. So that is kind of a thing that when you look at this midfield and attack, it's pretty decent. I think there's really not much needed to change in terms of the midfield and in the attack except for a DP forward. I do think that they need a goal scored on this team. I mean, when you look at the top goal scorer this season, nobody hit double digit, and really that's been a problem for this Timbers team for the last 2 years or so, where they just don't have that number 9 player that can be a regular goal scorer. So that's going to be one thing that they're going to be looking into, and especially with the way that I know for sure they're going to have one DP spot open with Nishikoda not returning heading into next year. They might be looking forward to use that spot again and maybe sign something similar to the amount that they signed when they spent $10 million to trying to get Evander to this team. The back line, of course, it still needs to improve. Again, I will say that they have at least sent some help in terms of the back line. I mean, they did get Miguel Araujo during the summer transfer window, and doing his limited time with the Timbers. Yeah, it was kind of quite questionable in terms of his performance. In fact, in his first performance, he actually was part of the first performance that he has. It was part of that game where they lost 5-0 to the Houston Dynamo. So yeah, that's definitely not a great first impression for a guy that was supposed to maybe help out the back line, but yeah, he turns out to be pretty bad in his first appearance. So yeah, they definitely need some help in terms of the defense. And the same goes for goalkeeping too. Again, goalkeeping is one area that they definitely need to invest now that Ivasic is no longer with the team. I think Bingham is now the starting goalkeeper, and David Bingham, he had a good season, at least maybe back in 2015 and 2016 when he was with the Quakes. But ever since he made that move to the Quakes to the Galaxy, it's just been all downhill ever since. He's not a starting caliber goalkeeper, so that's going to be something that they're going to be looking for this offseason too. And then finally, one thing I actually have not mentioned, and I get to finally mention in this moving forward series episode, is their new head coach, Phil Neville. So again, when Phil Neville was hired by the Portland Timbers, there was a lot of responses uh that met with some negative kind of reaction in terms of him being hired as the head coach of the Portland Timbers. And it makes sense because, during his time with Inter Miami, that Inter Miami team was just so up and down, and that some of the tactics that he has used are just not good whatsoever. So there's a lot of concern for Timbers fans of saying that, well, for a head coach that was kind of mediocre and was very up and down, is that going to be a better option compared to when they, of course, have Giovanni Savarese in helm? I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of Timbers fans were not expecting them replacing Savarese with Phil Neville. But that being said, we'll see whether or not if Phil Neville can prove himself wrong and maybe even go with the Ben Olsen route because as I mentioned with Ben Olsen, he was a very unpopular hire when the Houston Dynamo hired him, and he only got that team to win a U.S. Open Cup and a Western Conference final appearance. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the same case with Phil Neville, and I don't expect that's going to be the same case, but he's going to be thrown right into the fryer, and then there's going to be some pressure with him because when you hire a guy that is a very unpopular hire, the performance has to to be there right away because if the performance are not there, it's going to be very easy for a lot of these Timbers fans to immediately turn on Phil Neville and even turn on the front office too because the front office hired him and think that was the right option, and it turns out it was not even close to being the right option. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of looking at the Portland Timbers in the Moving Forward series episode. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video. If you're a Timbers fan, what do you think went right, went wrong, and moving forward, how is this team going to look heading into next season? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I, of course, will see you guys next time.